Emma, did you have any questions?
I had a few things to say, like about the book itself. One of the main things I have a lot of friends who have been writing books recently, and I've been kind of like reviewing their work, and so I've had a lot to reference against your book. So I'm gonna like praise you for like having such an amazingly written book and how it's been so like adequately flowing. You get the whole story. You don't feel like there are parts of the story that are like trailing off or that you're reading for no reason and there's too much detail. One of my main things was your first three chapters were written almost like a cinematic movie, like you were watching, like you were in church with Annie in the first one, and it establishes in the first chapter that she has anxiety. She starts experiencing anxiety. You see her tapping. In the second one, she goes to the grocery store, or she's cooking with her family. Is that, yeah? So in the second one, she's with her family and she gets very frustrated. Her anxiety wells up. You learn in the second chapter that she's now medicating for her anxiety. In the third chapter, she's at the grocery store and she realizes she's out of medication, and you realize it's a stigma for her. She's actually ashamed of this. And so each chapter, while being something that was cinematic to read, like at church, at the grocery store with her family, it inserted a very important plot point in each chapter. So it was not like you were reading a story that was frivolous or did not have a point. It had a point that drew you in. And so when everything ended with Annie's chapter, with her overdosing and how it went straight on to Joe, and then you see her standing with Louie and they're there fighting, and then suddenly she gets a phone call and they're fighting and it's so mad, and then she's like, she picks up the phone and then it's like silence almost, and you can feel this in the book when she picks it up and she's just like falling apart, and she's like, it's Annie, she's almost dead, like something's happened, like she almost killed herself, she's like in shock, right? And so um that impact when it picked back up after the first chapter with knowing what had happened to Annie, because you didn't know until the call to Joe. I thought that was obviously expert writing. So it was like I'm praising how you wrote this book so perfectly. And like even little things, like I complimented the font, how I felt like I could actually like read it at a farther distance, and that enabled me to read while doing other things as well. And um, finally, with the points of how everybody healed and self-regulated. Self-regulation is something that's really huge for people. In this society today, we don't realize how dysregulated we truly are. In the beginning, when we were in our natural state where we breathed fresh oxygen, we had our circadian rhythms aligned, we had fresh foods, and we lived amongst the world. We were amongst the world. We were not just on top of the world. And so our regulation to life was so much better, and we didn't have nervous system problems. We didn't experience anxiety. We didn't experience depression because life every day was in its natural state. Whereas now it very much is not. And so we experience things like anxiety, like depression, like these overwhelming like panic attacks and things that typically wouldn't be happening. But because these women have adapted to grounding, to breathing, to spending time in nature, to reestablishing their human nature as it is, as we're supposed to be as mammals amongst the world, it shows you like what we need to do as people to also self-regulate. And so little things like getting proper sleep and like eating and being in fresh oxygen are things that are like very tremendous. When I was 19, I had an injury where I had a brain injury, and I suffered from psychosomatic illness for about 3 years. And I had agoraphobia. I couldn't leave my house at all. And it was something that I had to learn to take on every day. And breathing, visualization, grounding techniques, those were things that helped me step back into life. Um, Above all else was invading my own comfort zone and allowing myself to be afraid and allowing myself to be fearful. I wrote on my phone, I set a screensaver on my phone that said, courage is not the absence of fear, it is the willingness to act in spite of it. And so if you can wake up, and even though you're shaking, even though you're afraid and you don't want to go to the doctor, you don't want to see your friends, you don't want to start your career, you don't want to face life again because you've been so messed up, you can, and it can re-regulate, and you can regulate yourself. All you have to do is put in the work, put in the effort, and learn to step back and get back to your natural roots in life. The biggest thing for me was obviously getting back in touch with the earth. And so being at the beach, being near the ocean, that was something that really, like, I could never be without now, because once you have gone through trauma, you never go back. But who you are now with this regulation, with this practice, with this understanding, with these coping mechanisms is stronger than this person who you were before, who was susceptible to having panic attacks, to falling into depression, to having anxiety, to hating yourself, because you didn't learn how to love, you didn't learn how to regulate, and you didn't learn your place in the world. And so my final statement on this with Annie and how she came to be in the state that she was in, if you don't establish a sense of self, this sense of self that says, I'm a mom, I'm a person, I'm a human, I'm a woman, I'm here, I'm alive, this is what I like, this is what I do, this is what I think and I feel and my opinions, you're never going to be able to stand up to another person when they question you and say, I understand that you're different. I understand we're all different. I understand that each individual human makes up the human experience, and that is what makes us all special. So me, myself, I know that I've been through this. I know that maybe I'm not the weight that I want to be, or I'm not at the intelligence level that I want to be, or that I'm not in the life that I want to be living. But at the same time, you're alive, you're breathing, you're here, and you exist. And those are things that are a blessing beyond life. And literally just by drawing breath every day, you are an anomaly that exists amongst this planet. And so we question ourselves on, why are we here? What is our purpose? What does it matter that we're living these lives, that we're producing these next generations, that it's just going on and on and on? The purpose and point of life is to live life, and it's to experience, it's to feel, it's to share, and it's to know what it is to be human and to be alive. And so if you are experiencing anxiety and depression and disconnect from anything in your life, reach out to people, speak is the biggest thing. There's a difference between complaining and expressing. I want to say this to a lot of people because they feel like, I don't want to talk about my life. I don't want to talk about what's wrong with me. Speak. People need to know. Sandra and Joe didn't know Annie was going through something because they didn't speak to her. She didn't reach out. And that's why therapy is important. That's why having your parents is, and your family is important. Having your friends and people who listen and care and love and share in this human experience, because it is an anomaly and it is radical and it is something that we can never grab a hold of or fully, truly comprehend. So having things that ground you, like your family, like your career, like your passions in life, are things that are going to carry you. So thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
That was quite inspirational.
Yeah.
Thank you for the
You're welcome.
compliment.